Hey guys, tonight we step off a creaking wooden ship and straight into one of the most unforgiving chapters of early American history. The salty air of the Atlantic still clings to your clothes, and you squint into the pale winter sunlight of a rocky, foreign coast, Plymouth. It's 1620. You're cold, exhausted, and honestly, not sure if this was a mistake. Spoiler alert, it kind of was. See, you probably won't survive this, but you're here now, huddled among other hopeful souls who traded the known discomforts of England for the totally unknown horrors of a land they barely understand. There's no welcome center, no warm bed, no stocked pantry, just trees, wind, and an ominous silence that suggests this place isn't quite sure about you either. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me where you're watching from and what time it is right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing that hits you, besides the frigid December air, is the smell. You'd expect pine or ocean or maybe even fresh snow. But no, it smells like people. Damp, cramped, seasick people who've been aboard a ship called the Mayflower for over 2 months. Think wet wool, spoiled salted beef, and breath. Lots of breath. The kind of air that clings to your nose hairs. You shuffle down the gangplank, heart pounding with excitement and dread. This is supposed to be the promised land, but there's no clearing crew, no outpost, not even a clear idea of where you're going to sleep. The pilgrims, you included, picked this spot not because it was ideal, but because you were too tired, too beaten down, and honestly too seasick to go any farther. Your first official act on dry land? You get on your knees and give thanks, not because you're overcome with spiritual ecstasy, but because your legs have completely forgotten how to walk like a land dweller. You wobble like a newborn deer. Several others fall. One throws up. It's beautiful, really. A fun historical fact: the Pilgrims didn't actually land on Plymouth Rock. At least, not according to anyone at the time. The famous rock wasn't even mentioned until over a century later. Historians still argue whether Plymouth Rock is an actual landing spot or just a nice, touristy myth someone cooked up much later. But hey, it photographs well. By nightfall, the temperature drops below freezing, and your glorious new life begins with trying to sleep on damp earth under a makeshift lean-to. You pull a thin wool blanket over your body and immediately wonder how the heck you're going to make it through one night, let alone a lifetime. The next day, you're sent out to scout. The terrain is beautiful but brutal. The trees are tall, the wind biting, and there's no sign of any pre-built infrastructure. Surprise! You've arrived at a raw patch of wilderness, and you're expected to build a civilization from scratch with tools you can count on one hand. Still, spirits are oddly high. People keep telling each other things like, "This is God's will," and "We'll be fine once the houses are up." No one seems to mention that you have exactly 0 houses up, and building materials are sparse, and oh yeah, you have no idea what animals might be watching from the tree line. You step in something questionable and keep walking. At this point, you realize the real danger isn't starvation or disease yet. It's morale. The mental unraveling begins early. Everyone's trying to act like they're okay, but between the dysentery, the lice, and the fact that you haven't had a hot meal in months, it's starting to show. That guy over there is muttering to his shoe. You wonder if it's contagious. What's genuinely eerie, though, is how quiet the land is. There are no bustling animals, no human voices beyond your own, and no signs of the Wampanoag. At least, not yet. But you know they're watching. Tracks appear. Tools go missing. At night, you hear something crackling through the brush. And then there's the food situation. You packed for a transatlantic voyage, not a survival marathon. The stores are dwindling fast. Salted pork has turned into salted regret. You discover something called ship's biscuit, which sounds fun until you bite into one and nearly lose a tooth. It's less like bread and more like a chewable brick. Still, it beats starving. Barely. Your nights are long and freezing. Fires offer some comfort, but only until the embers fade and you're reminded just how thin your clothes are. Someone tries to tell a story to lighten the mood. It involves a ghost ship and a talking cod. No one laughs, but you all appreciate the effort. You wake up with frost in your hair, your fingers stiff, and a deep ache in your lower back that suggests you're definitely not built for this lifestyle. Welcome to New England. Still, you keep moving forward, because what else is there to do? There's no turning back. The Mayflower is still docked for now, but rumor has it won't stay forever. If you go back, you failed. If you stay, you might die. It's a real win-win. By the third day, your first blister opens. It's oddly satisfying to watch, like popping bubble wrap, but much less sanitary. You cover it with a scrap of linen and pretend it doesn't hurt. It does. Every morning begins with prayer and ends with sore muscles, and each sunset feels like a minor miracle. You haven't eaten anything green in weeks, and you're starting to dream about lettuce. Not steak or pie, just plain old, crunchy, unassuming lettuce. And yet, somehow, you convince yourself that this is progress, that things are going to get better, that spring will come, the ground will soften, and the harvest will be abundant. But first, winter has to do its worst. You wake up with your jaw clenched tight, your face half frozen, and a rock for a pillow. Your knees ache, your nose is running, and as your eyes adjust to the gray morning light, you realize someone nearby is sobbing softly. It's the kind of crying a grown man does when he's trying not to cry. The kind where every inhale sounds like a leaky bellows. You don't blame him. Winter in Plymouth hits like a sledgehammer to the teeth. There's no gentle snowfall or jingle bells here. Just cruel winds that cut through your cloak, sleet that soaks your only set of clothes, and a relentless cold that makes you question all your life choices, including this whole New World idea. You're in what historians later called the starving time, although no one back then used a catchy label. They were too busy not eating. The landscape is beautiful in a please don't die here sort of way. Glittering frost across leafless trees, snow-packed animal tracks, and a sky so clear it makes you miss walls. Your body is burning calories just to stay warm, which is awkward because there are very few calories to go around. Rations are shrinking by the day. Remember that salted fish you gagged over last week? You'd fight someone for it now. Instead, today's dinner is a meager scoop of cornmeal gruel, and you're lucky if it doesn't have bugs. Not because bugs are gross, but because they're extra protein and you need them. Some folks are chewing on leather. Literally. Boot soles, belts, anything vaguely edible. You gnaw on a strap and try to pretend it's jerky. It's not. It's leather. You're mostly just salivating on your own foot fashion. One of the quirkier records from this time, colonists sometimes boiled tree bark into soup. Not because it tasted good, it didn't, but because it was fibrous, vaguely nutritious, and less humiliating than licking rocks. Historians still argue whether certain bark species actually offered any benefit or just gave people splinters on the inside. At night, the cold deepens. You huddle with strangers, which would be awkward in England but is necessary here. Modesty has no place in frostbite prevention. Someone's snoring in your ear. Someone else's feet are on your chest. You try not to think about what that smell is. And just when you think it can't get worse, someone gets up to use the chamber pot and knocks it over. It spills. The stench is, well, let's just say you're now very awake. And wet. There's no proper shelter yet. Not really. A few crude huts are half finished, made from logs and thatch, but they let in wind like they're auditioning to be wind tunnels. You've got maybe 4 tools to share between dozens of people, and no one's really sure how to build a house that won't just fall over in a strong breeze. You help saw a log with another colonist, whose name you think is Thomas, or maybe William. Everyone here is named Thomas or William. Anyway, your hands blister quickly. You drop the saw. Thomas William glares at you like you've just personally offended the king. You want to yell that you've never built anything more complicated than a bookshelf in your life, but instead you pick up the saw and try again. Back on the Mayflower, the sick are still huddled below deck. The ship stayed longer than expected, mostly because the crew knew full well that if they dumped you all here and sailed off, most of you wouldn't last a week. Joke's on them, though. You're still not lasting. Captain Christopher Jones is still docked offshore, grumbling about supplies and disease, and trying not to let his sailors desert. One tried last week, just dove overboard and started swimming for England. You all watched him disappear into the icy harbor. No one ever saw him again. When it snows, and it does frequently, it's not the soft, magical movie snow. It's wet, heavy. It melts and refreezes. It collapses roofs and drenches clothing. You've got no laundry system yet. So wet clothes mean moldy clothes. And moldy clothes mean, well, you smell. A lot. But so does everyone else. You start to miss the way you used to smell. During one particularly bitter morning, the only thing that gets you out of your freezing pile of straw is the promise of something hot. Someone managed to make a watery broth with boiled corn, a pinch of salt, and a miracle. You hold your wooden cup like it's a goblet of gold. It's the best thing you've tasted in weeks, which isn't saying much. You watch as another colonist collapses in the snow. She's not dead, just weak. Someone helps her up, but the worry hangs thick in the air. People are thinning out. Literally. Your clothes fit looser. Cheekbones are sharpening. The laughing has stopped. Still, you keep chopping wood, digging out snow, and telling yourself it'll get better. That this is just a test. That spring will fix everything. A weird side note. Some of the women volunteered to stay on the Mayflower to take care of the sick, even though they knew it was a death sentence. By the end of that winter, almost all of them had died. It's a little-known fact that the women suffered the highest mortality rate in those first months. Historians still debate why. Some say it was self-sacrifice. Others say it was exposure and malnutrition combined with caregiving duties. Either way, it's grim. Back in your little snowy world, your breath hangs in front of your face in thick clouds. You try to joke with someone, something about eating a squirrel raw if you could just catch one, but the laugh dies in your throat. A boy next to you picks up a rock, licks it, and shakes his head. Still no flavor, he mutters. You both chuckle at that one. It's the first laugh you've had in days. It echoes weirdly in the trees. Then a wind picks up and slices straight through your soul. You bury yourself deeper into your ragged coat and wonder again why no one thought to pack mittens. The gnawing in your stomach has become a constant companion, like an annoying song stuck on repeat. You've moved past hunger pangs and into the realm of daydreams, ones where roasted meat and hot bread float, just out of reach like mirages in a snow-covered wasteland. You've never fantasized about onions before, but now, you trade your boots for a sautéed sliver. It's official, the food is gone. Not low, not running out, gone. What little remained of the ship's rations was rationed into oblivion, and the emergency stores you buried. The local wildlife found them first, and you'd shake your fist at the raccoons, if you had the energy to lift your arm. So what's on the menu now? Well, a few enterprising souls have discovered that boiled leather is technically edible. It's tough, rubbery, and tastes like wet shoes because it is wet shoes. You sit by the fire, chewing on your own bell tip like a sad Pioneer-themed beef jerky commercial. No one speaks. There's nothing to say. Just the occasional snap of the fire and a chorus of gnawing. And then someone eats a candle. A tallow candle. Made from animal fat. It's not great, but it melts in your mouth, and that counts for something. Not bad with a pinch of ash. Someone jokes weakly. You laugh. You cry. Hard to tell the difference anymore. The reality is grim. People are dying. Some quietly in their sleep. Others slowly and visibly in the cold corners of the settlement. You've helped bury 3 this week. One was barely 15. Another was a man who used to sing hymns every night, now wrapped in his own coat, like a discarded puppet. The worst part, you're getting used to it. You overhear someone mutter, "We'll be digging graves with spoons soon." It's only half a joke. Historical records suggest that by the end of the first winter, only about half of the Mayflower passengers and crew were still alive. That's not dramatized. That's just numbers. And while we often hear about the noble perseverance of the Pilgrims, let's be clear. Perseverance looks a lot like shivering in the dirt, nibbling on your shoe, and praying for anything that once moved. What's fascinating, if you can call it that, is how many people tried to maintain normalcy amid the collapse. There were attempts at morning prayers, journals still being written by frostbitten hands, even whispered plans for planting crops when the thaw came. Because somehow, deep in the marrow, hope kept flickering. One guy starts drawing in the snow with a stick, sketching out what he insists will be the town square someday. You don't have the heart to tell him he just drew it over the communal latrine pit. And then there's you, caught somewhere between hopeful and hysterical. You find yourself looking at tree bark with new interest. Not for lumber, but for flavor. You heard someone say spruce bark tea helps with scurvy. Does it? Historians still argue whether bark-based remedies were effective or just placebo for the desperate. Either way, you're steeping it tonight. Desperation does strange things to people. You watch a woman barter a wool bonnet for a squirrel tail. A man sharpens a stick and mutters something about going bear hunting, even though no one has seen a bear. Or maybe they have and decided not to share. One night, around the fire, someone tells a tale about Jamestown. You know, the other English colony down south that was supposed to be more successful? Supposedly, during their own starving time, colonists resorted to eating people, and not in a metaphorical, we're all feeding off each other's despair kind of way. Actual cannibalism. You don't want to believe it, but you do eye the man next to you and think, he does look well fed. The fire crackles. Then there's the salt water. Someone had the bright idea to boil seawater down to make salt. And technically it works. But drinking too much of it, you're already starving. You don't need a bonus dehydration round. Still, a little salt makes the boiled leather go down easier. Slightly. Every day now, you're asked to do something impossible with fewer and fewer resources. Build a shelter using snow-soaked planks. Hunt in a forest you don't understand. Fish with no bait and a frozen river. It's like someone gave you a survival video game on hard mode, then threw the controller into the sea. Your boots are falling apart. Your toes are no more often than not. You're too afraid to check for black skin, too hopeful to assume they're fine. You wrap them in rags and keep walking. One bright moment, someone found clams. Real, edible, non-imaginary clams down by the shoreline. They're small, gritty, and smell questionable, but you devour them like candy. You've never been so excited about slimy sea meat. You even get a second helping because someone else passed out mid-bite. Another weird historical tidbit. Some early colonists tried boiling seagrass or eating tree moss. It's not exactly gourmet, and no one wrote a recipe book, but a few people claimed it worked in a pinch. You choose some out of curiosity. Verdict, not recommended. You keep expecting help to arrive. A new shipment, a rescue boat, maybe just a talking moose with a wagon of bread. Nothing comes. The wilderness is quiet, and the sea is frozen over like a cruel joke. You're stuck. You pass the time counting ribs. Not in an artistic way. In the can I see mine yet way. Yes, you can. Everyone looks like walking scarecrows, their clothes hanging like scarecrow skin. And still, somewhere inside, something keeps you upright. A sliver of stubbornness. A glimmer of imagined spring. You hold onto the idea that soon, there will be gardens, warmth, and real food. But not yet. Tonight, you curl up next to a pile of straw, clutch your stomach, and dream of butter. It starts with a cough. Not yours, someone else's. Wet, rattling, and way too close. You ignore it at first. Everyone's coughing. Everyone's sneezing. Everyone sounds like they've swallowed gravel. But this one keeps going. And then you hear the wheeze. That deep, chesty sound like a bellows with a hole in it. Welcome to the real predator of Plymouth disease. Sure, the cold's been brutal. The hunger has been constant. But disease? It doesn't wait for you to fall apart. It does the dismantling for you. You've never seen so many people sick at once. Chills, fevers, sores, confusion. It hits fast. And the worst part? No one knows what any of it is. Everyone just calls it the sickness. Like it's one single entity. A fog that rolls in, picks its victim, and moves on. You, of course, have no immune defense against this collection of European plagues. Your body is like a brand new phone without antivirus, attractive to every bug and completely unprepared. Back in England, you might have had exposure. Here, isolated and exhausted, your system's running on zero. And let's not forget hygiene. Bathing. Unheard of. The concept of germs? A couple centuries away. You wipe your nose with the same cloth you use to dry your hands, and someone hands you soup with fingers they definitely just sneezed into. It's a miracle anyone made it out of this chapter alive. Your bunkmate, because yes, you're sharing now, is burning with fever. His skin feels like a stove plate, and he's muttering something about his mother's garden. You offer water, but he swats it away, spilling most of it on your already damp blanket. He doesn't make it to morning. They bury him in the snow. Quickly, quietly, before the ground freezes too hard again, and before the smell starts. One fringe detail that rarely makes it into the school books. During the worst of the winter, the dead were sometimes buried at night, not just because of the cold, but to hide the rising death toll from nearby indigenous people. The settlers feared they'd appear weak, vulnerable, easy to attack. So they'd sneak out in the dark, shovel the hard-packed dirt, and whisper their goodbyes while pretending everything was fine come morning. Historians still argue whether the Wampanoag actually intended to attack, or if that was just European paranoia talking. There's no record of an aggressive move from the tribes that winter. If anything, the Wampanoag were watching, waiting, and maybe even wondering what these pale, coughing strangers were doing to themselves. You're trying not to get sick, but it's pointless. It's in the air, on the blankets, in the food. You develop a strange rash on your hands. Is it frostbite? Is it scurvy? Is it a mild reaction to boiled moss? Who knows? Your breath smells bad, like worryingly bad. A woman nearby whispers something about mouth rot, and you pretend you didn't hear it. One guy develops a strange lump under his jaw and walks around with a scarf like he's in a Jane Austen drama. Another starts vomiting blood. Everyone quietly avoids him. No one wants to share a bowl anymore. Not even the wooden spoons are safe. You remember that chamber pot incident? There have been more. Hygiene is a battlefield, and you are losing. Latrines overflow. Snow piles up around waste pits. Some folks just go behind trees now. The forest is turning into an unintentional health hazard. At one point, you try to boil your shirt in hot water just to kill whatever's living in it. It shrinks 3 sizes and now smells like wet dog stew. But hey, you tried. You pass the time by pacing when you have the strength, and by staring at your fingernails when you don't. There's a white line forming halfway up your nail beds. Someone says it's a sign of illness. Someone else says it's a sign of stress. Either way, you name them death stripes just to be festive. During one particularly long night, the sickness creeps into your lungs. You wake coughing so hard you nearly black out. Your throat is raw. You're sweating and freezing at the same time. Someone places a damp cloth on your forehead, but it smells like fish, and you throw it across the hut. You apologize, but no one hears you. The elders say this is a test from God, a purging of the weak. You nod, mostly because it's easier than arguing, but you're starting to think maybe this is just what happens when you dump a ship full of people into a freezing wilderness and tell them to figure it out. Here's a strange moment. One woman, her name is Patience, of all things, starts humming while washing a rag in melted snow. It's a lullaby, something soft and haunting. Her voice carries across the cold air, and for a second, everything feels still. You close your eyes and pretend you're somewhere else, somewhere warm, and then someone starts coughing again, and the illusion shatters. Despite everything, there's still a daily ritual, the tally. Every morning, someone checks who's still breathing. A roll call of the barely alive. Names are whispered, and if no one answers, a blanket is lifted. If the body's cold, the burial crew is summoned. You hate that crew, not because of what they do, but because of how familiar they're becoming. One day, you see a mother carrying her sick child to the fire, whispering prayers under her breath. She keeps repeating his name, like she can anchor him to life through repetition. He survives the day, not the night. You're numb now, not just from the cold, but emotionally. The first death shook you. The 5th left you quiet. By the 20th, you barely react. But then, you wake up one morning, and it's not as cold. The air feels different. Still frigid, yes, but the breeze isn't slicing anymore. You can hear birdsong. Real birds. Alive, flapping, singing things that didn't exist last week. And it hits you. You might be turning a corner. If you survive just a little longer, there's a chance. The sun has returned, kind of. It's not exactly warm, but it is brighter, and it stays up longer than before. You watch it linger just a few degrees higher in the sky, as if nature itself is teasing you, look, warmth. Not for you yet, but soon maybe. You let yourself believe it. But here's the kicker. Just as winter begins to ease, death doesn't. It almost gets worse, if only because now the ground's soft enough to dig graves again. And suddenly you realize how many people didn't make it through that long, frozen chapter. The hill beyond the main encampment has turned into a quiet forest of makeshift markers. There are too many names, and not enough wood for crosses. And now that the ground is thawed just enough to bury your dead properly, you're part of the burial crew. Congrats. You and 3 others carry the stiff body of someone you once shared a blanket with. Now just a name carved into a plank. The shovel hits dirt instead of ice. And for once, the soil actually moves. But that only reminds you how often you were not able to do this before. The smell of decay, still there. Only now it's stronger, more real. The snow used to hide it. Now, with every breeze, it sneaks into your nostrils and makes itself known. Some of the bodies from earlier in the season, well, they hadn't been buried so much as tucked somewhere. Now those have to be moved, reburied, dignified. It's humbling work. Haunting, too. And all the while, you're wondering if your own grave is already halfway dug by someone else. But you keep going, because there's literally nothing else to do. And then, there's the question no one wants to ask out loud. How many are left? You started with over 100. Men, women, children, families, entire households. Now, you're down by half, maybe more. Someone tries to count, but stops midway through, eyes glassy. The survivors huddle together tighter now, not just for warmth, but because every person lost feels like a piece of your own fading strength. What's eerie is how quiet things have become. Without the coughing, the crying, the pacing, the prayers, it's almost peaceful, but not the good kind. It's a hush born of exhaustion. You speak in whispers, not out of respect, but because speaking loudly just takes too much energy. You find yourself talking to the dead, not in a dramatic, haunted sort of way, more like casually, in passing. Hey, John, remember when we thought this place would be paradise? You say while walking past his grave. It makes you feel less alone. A little crazy, sure, but also less alone. Here's your historical fact for today. During those early months, some graves were left unmarked intentionally. The colonists feared that if the local tribes saw how many were dying, they might see the settlement as weak and make a move. Again, historians still debate how real this threat was. Some suggest it was more fear than fact. But either way, the graves were hidden. That's not just metaphor, it's strategic burial. There's something grotesquely practical about that. You're freezing, starving, sick, and you still find time to hide corpses like you're playing a grim game of colonial poker. The funniest part of this whole thing, if there's a funny part, is that no one really knows what they're doing. At all. You've got a group of religious separatists, a few laborers, some servants, and a handful of sailors, all trying to run a society with no doctors, no architects, and not nearly enough farmers. You were a tailor's apprentice. That's right. You were good with a needle, not an axe. But here you are, sawing logs and digging graves. You laugh thinking about the time you pricked your finger on a thimble and thought that was a bad day. Even Governor Bradford seems overwhelmed. He tries to hold it together, giving small speeches near the fire, rallying the group with words like providence and fortitude. But you see it in his eyes, the same hollow look everyone else wears. Leadership, it turns out, doesn't make you immune to frostbite or grief. In a moment of strange clarity, someone reads from the Geneva Bible. The pages are warped from damp, and the ink is faded, but the words land heavy. Something about endurance, trials, glory on the other side of suffering. You nod politely while picking a beetle out of your sleeve. Faith is great, but soup would be better. And just as you're getting used to the silence of loss, the coughing starts again. A new wave. Not as devastating as the first, but enough to remind you that disease doesn't care about your emotional recovery arc. This time, it's the general sickness. That's what you're calling it now. Just sickness. A broad, lazy label for anything that makes people pale and sweaty and dead. Could be typhus. Could be influenza. Could be dysentery. You'll never know. All you know is that it knocks people down like dominoes. You start sleeping with one eye open, not for fear of being attacked, but because you're waiting to see who makes it through the night. One guy, Matthew maybe, starts making a tally mark in the dirt wall of the hut for every person who passes. You lose count at 40. He keeps going. Your dreams, when you do sleep, are vivid, feverish. You see England, fields of green, fresh bread, your mother's hands. You wake up chewing your sleeve. You can still taste the leather. And still morning comes. Every day, even when it shouldn't. The sun rises, and with it comes the slow, grinding machinery of survival. You pull yourself out of your hay pile. You tie your boots, what's left of them. You walk out to chop wood, collect snow for water, feed the weak. You keep going. One foot, then the other. You're still here. Somehow. The joke used to be, at least we've got each other. But these days, even that feels a bit optimistic, because it's becoming painfully clear. No one really knows what they're doing. You had all these lofty ideas coming off the Mayflower, visions of tidy rows of houses, bustling trade, fruitful fields, maybe a bakery, maybe a blacksmith. You were promised community, order, civilization. Instead, you're staring at half-built shelters, sagging like wet cardboard, food stores that consist mostly of crushed cornmeal and regret, and neighbors who argue about everything from fence placement to who's supposed to feed the goat, which, for the record, disappeared 3 nights ago. Some say wolves, some say dinner. Turns out, the Plymouth colony is less of a town and more of a panic group project, where half the team didn't show up and the rest keep looking at you like you're the only one who brought a pencil. Nobody here is really equipped for wilderness life. Most of you were craftsmen, tradespeople, or religious idealists, not survivalists. You know your way around a hymnal, not a hunting trap. And trying to build a village from scratch? Well, it would help if someone actually knew how to build things. One of the older men, Barnabas or Bartholomew, or something equally Puritan, swears he once apprenticed with a carpenter. But after his workbench collapses for the 3rd time, you're starting to suspect he was more of a broom closet assistant. You offer to help, then realize you're using a hammer to drive a wooden peg into another peg. It falls apart. You nod solemnly and declare, that was the prototype. Even the simplest things are complex out here. For instance, farming. You know the theory. Dig hole, plant seed, add water, wait. But the soil in this area? It's sandy, acidic, and about as welcoming to crops as a brick wall. You plant anyway. Corn, beans, squash, whatever you have left. You water with melted snow. You say a prayer. You cross your fingers. Then you watch it sit there and do nothing. Historical fact. The settlers originally planted crops in European fashion. Tight rows. Heavy tilling. But this wasn't Europe. The soil didn't respond well. It wasn't until the Wampanoag introduced the Three Sisters method, planting corn, beans, and squash together, that any meaningful harvest began. But right now, you haven't learned that trick yet. You're still staring at dead dirt like it personally offended you. Meanwhile, everyone's arguing. A lot. Because when you're starving, cold, and surrounded by failure, bickering is all you've got left. Some say Governor Bradford is too soft. Others say he's too strict. A few say he's cursed. One guy thinks Bradford is secretly hoarding food in his beard. No one takes it seriously, but they do check when he's asleep. Your hutmates start forming little cliques. One group is obsessed with rebuilding the meeting house. Another wants to focus only on food. A third has gone full end times and spends their days reciting scripture and staring into the woods. You try to float between groups, helpful and neutral, but honestly, you just want someone to invent coffee. And don't even get started on the tools. You've got maybe one good axe, 3 knives, and a saw that works when it feels like it. You share them as best you can, but things vanish. Borrowed tools disappear into huts and don't return. Accusations start. Someone loses their temper over a missing hammer. A fight breaks out. No one's strong enough to win, so it ends in heavy breathing and mutual shame. The chaos bleeds into the schedule. There was a daily rhythm once, prayer, labor, meal, rest. But now it's all improvisation. Some folks wake at dawn. Others refuse to leave their bunks until noon. There's no clock, so everything runs on the sun and passive-aggressive muttering. It's around this time you hear the strangest thing of all: laughter. Real laughter. From a child, you follow the sound to find a small group of kids playing with sticks and pine cones, pretending to be soldiers. One has a bucket on his head. Another declares herself the Goat Queen and makes a crown out of twigs. For a moment, you forget everything. The pain, the cold, the rot. And you smile. Then the bucket kid throws up. Still, for a few seconds, there was joy. That counts. Another fringe tidbit. There was no centralized punishment system in these early days. If someone stole food or hoarded supplies, the community handled it. Sometimes with prayer. Sometimes with shunning. Once, a man was tied to a tree overnight for sneaking extra rations. You remember, because you were the one who had to untie him. He never made eye contact again. And amidst all this bumbling dysfunction, there are whispers of diplomacy. A few colonists report seeing native people in the trees, watching silently. No contact yet, just presence. The mood shifts slightly. Is it curiosity? Is it threat? No one knows. But it adds another layer of tension to a settlement already teetering on the edge. Some folks argue you should approach them, offer peace. Others say arm the militia, which consists of 3 rusty swords and a musket that misfires. Historians still argue whether the settlers planned peaceful coexistence from the start or simply reacted out of desperation when winter took its toll. You personally, you don't care. You just want help. Any kind. Any language. That night, a storm rolls in. You patch your roof with moss and hope for the best. It leaks anyway. You fall asleep in damp straw, dreaming of warm bread and plumbing. Tomorrow you'll try to fix the fence, or maybe plant another patch of corn, or maybe just sit and listen to the birds, pretending everything's fine. After all, you're still alive. You think. When it happens, it's so surreal you almost don't believe it. There's a shout, short, sharp, panicked. Then silence. Then another shout. This one carries. There's someone here. You run. Not fast. No one has the energy for fast, but you shuffle with purpose. Out past the half-finished fences, across the muddy path lined with slush and hoof prints that don't belong to any of your animals, because, reminder, they've mostly been eaten. And there, standing near the edge of the trees, like a storybook figure who took a wrong turn out of the forest, is a man. He's tall, wrapped in fur and leather, and he looks calm. Very calm. Which makes everyone more nervous. And then he speaks. In English. Kind of. Welcome, Englishman. You blink. You look at the man next to you, who's just dropped his stickaxe. Someone behind you gasps. For a moment, it's unclear whether this is a miracle or a hallucination brought on by malnutrition and pine fumes. The man introduces himself, Samoset. He's not from the local tribe, the Wampanoag, but from farther north, an Abenaki Sagamore who learned English from fishermen and traders off the coast of Maine. He tells you he's a friend. He asks for beer. You don't have beer. You haven't had beer in months. You barely have water. But someone finds a gourd of corn liquor and offers it. Samoset drinks and smiles. The thing is, this isn't just friendly chatter. This is your first real human connection in what feels like an eternity. Not a freezing, hollow-eyed settler. Not a hallucinated goat. An actual person from this land, standing in front of you, speaking to you in your own tongue like it's the most normal thing in the world. Historical fact. Samoset's arrival on March 16th, 1621, was a turning point. His ability to communicate set in motion the earliest diplomatic links between the settlers and the indigenous people. Still, historians argue whether his appearance was spontaneous or carefully orchestrated by the Wampanoag as a way to gauge the settlers' weakness. Either way, it changed everything. The next day, he comes back with someone else. Enter Squanto. Now this man. He's fluent. In English. In diplomacy. In survival. And he's been through enough tragedy to fill 100 bedtime stories. Kidnapped by Europeans, enslaved in Spain, shipped to England, then miraculously returned. only to find his entire Patuxet tribe wiped out by disease. And yet here he is, ready to help you. He looks around at your sad little colony of half-dead, half-frozen humans, and, incredibly, doesn't run screaming into the forest. Instead, he offers knowledge. Real knowledge. The kind that doesn't come from Bibles or London textbooks, but from generations of living here. He teaches you how to plant corn with fish heads, how to catch eels, how to find edible plants in what you'd previously dismissed as just bushes. You hang on every word, because Squanto doesn't just know things. He understands that you don't. He explains slowly, patiently, like a teacher trying to help a child tie their shoes without making them feel stupid. You feel stupid anyway, but grateful. Soon, a meeting is arranged between Governor Bradford and Massasoit, the Wampanoag sachem. The whole colony gathers for it, brushing straw from their sleeves, rubbing dirt off their faces, and pretending to be more upright and official than they've been in weeks. It's tense, formal. Two groups of exhausted people trying to decide if they're going to be enemies or not. The Wampanoag are cautious. After all, the last wave of European visitors brought disease and kidnapping. Ahem. See Squanto. But an agreement is made. A mutual protection pact. We won't hurt you. You won't hurt us. And if anyone else tries to hurt either of us, we'll help each other. It's not utopia, but it's the first solid, not freezing step toward survival. And you feel it, the shift. The wind doesn't bite quite as hard. The food situation is still bad, yes, but now there's a plan. And someone who knows what they're doing is finally calling the shots. And he's not even from your country. You start rebuilding with purpose. Squanto shows you how to use dead fish as fertilizer. It's gross, but effective. You scrape together seeds, mend broken tools, and dig deeper latrines, because apparently that's important. Wish someone had mentioned that earlier. You also start to rest. Not just sleep, but rest. Your brain stops spinning long enough to notice things. A robin perched on a broken fence. The sound of water dripping from a thawing roof. A child laughing without vomiting afterward. One guy starts writing poetry again. Bad poetry. Something about freedom and divine providence and fish guts. But still poetry. There's even talk of a harvest. Not now, of course, but someday. The soil still resists. The sun still hides. But now you know which weeds to pull, which plants to save, which trees not to lick. And it's because of Squanto, who, despite everything he's endured, despite everything you've unknowingly contributed to, is helping you not just survive, but live. You wonder why. You ask once, gently. He shrugs. Your people need help. Mine are gone. And that's it. You feel shame. Not because he's angry, but because he isn't. Because he's offering you what you don't deserve. Because he's better than you would have been. That night, sitting near a real fire with fish roasting and a breeze that doesn't sting your eyeballs, you whisper your thanks. Not just to Squanto, or Samoset, or Massasoit, but to the air itself, for letting you stay. Because for the first time in months, you might actually make it. It starts slowly. This thing you almost forgot how to feel. It's called hope. Not the idealistic, wide-eyed version you packed back in England, folded neatly next to your Salter and extra socks. This is the grizzled, dirt-covered, callous-knuckled kind of hope. The kind that comes after watching everything go wrong and still getting up the next day to plant another seed anyway. And speaking of seeds, something's finally sprouting. You check the dirt patch near the stream 3 times a day like it's a newborn. And there they are. Tiny green shoots poking up like shy dancers at their first rehearsal. Is it corn? Beans? Weeds with self-esteem issues? You're not sure. But it's growing. And that alone feels like a miracle. Squanto checks your work with a look of calm amusement. He corrects you gently. Your mounds are too shallow. Your spacing is off. But he doesn't laugh. You kind of wish he would laugh, just to release the tension that's been clinging to you like mildew. But instead, he just fixes your mistakes and teaches you how to do it right. Again. And you do it. Again. And again. Soon there's a rhythm. Wake up with the sun. Clean your corner of the hut. Feed the chickens. Well, chickens, singular, since the others wandered off. Read stew. Then it's time to weed. water, or dig, depending on the weather and how much energy your bones feel like sharing that day. It's still exhausting. The mosquitoes are back. Your boots are beyond repair. And the bugs, they've declared your body open territory. You're itchy in places you didn't know had skin. But the colony is moving now. Not thriving, exactly, but functioning. People are walking with a little more confidence. Arguments still happen, but they end with handshakes, or at least muttered apologies. One woman starts baking flatbread on a hot stone. It's hard as roofing tile and tastes vaguely like dirt, but you love it. It's warm. It smells like home. You learn new things every day. Which plants are poison, how to strip bark for thread, how to tell if a cloud means rain, or incoming frog apocalypse. Squanto shows you how to trap eels using woven baskets. You're not thrilled about touching eels, but you're so thrilled about eating something not named corn mush that you power through. Historical fact. The Wampanoag's techniques were highly adapted to the environment, like planting fish with corn for fertilizer, using raised mounds for better drainage, and even keeping track of the lunar cycles to time planting. It wasn't primitive, it was genius. And without it, there's no way you'd still be here. Historians still argue whether Squanto helped out of pure altruism or political calculation. Was he genuinely trying to help the Pilgrims, or leveraging them to regain influence among tribes after his own devastating losses? You don't know. But at this point, you don't care. Because either way, he's saving your life. And you're finally starting to return the favor, in very small ways. You build fences that don't fall over. You share water. You watch someone's child while they dig clay. You even patch a neighbor's roof without being asked. He nods. You nod. It's the closest thing to love Plymouth has seen in weeks. Then, one day, it happens. The first harvest. It's not spectacular. Let's be honest, it's kind of pathetic. The corn is uneven. The beans are stringy. The squash are fine. But you lay it all out on a makeshift table and stare like it's a royal feast. Because it is. You eat slowly. Intentionally. Every bite is a celebration. You pass a cob of corn to the boy who once tried to eat pine bark. He cries. Openly. You pretend not to notice. In the evening, the Wampanoag return. This time not for negotiations, but for celebration. Massasoit brings men, women, food. You all cook together. Laugh. Share stories. You trade words in each other's language, awkwardly, clumsily, kindly. Someone roasts venison. Someone else makes a kind of thick stew with unfamiliar spices. A child dances. Two men play a game involving sticks and shouting. You don't understand the rules, but you cheer anyway. This moment, it's not peace in the modern sense. There's still fear, misunderstanding, grief. But right now, around this fire, with the smell of cooked meat in the air and full bellies for the first time in months, it feels like a beginning, a real one. You sleep well that night. Deep, dreamless sleep. No coughing. No hunger. Just warmth and silence. The next morning, you wake to dew on your eyelashes and birdsong in the trees. The sun filters through the cracks in the roof like a blessing. Someone outside is singing. And for the first time since stepping off that cursed boat, you don't feel like you're surviving. You feel like you're living. Then comes the paperwork. Not the kind you fill out in an office with fluorescent lights and coffee stains, but the Puritan version, charters, oaths, pacts. The colony is no longer just a chaotic campsite for spiritual outcasts and soggy idealists. It's trying to become a government. You know, with rules. You remember the Mayflower Compact, don't you? Drafted months ago. Back when half the people signing it were still breathing. It was supposed to be a temporary agreement. Just something to hold everyone together long enough to get settled. But now, the leaders want structure, laws, hierarchy, probably a newsletter, if they could manage ink. Governor Bradford steps forward with that. I didn't sleep last night, but I'm pretending I'm fine. Look, you've come to recognize. He reads a list of new roles and responsibilities. Militia captain, surveyor, corn warden. That last one gets a chuckle. You laugh too. Until you realize he's serious. You get assigned defense maintenance. Not glamorous, but considering your previous resume of cold, hungry, and frequently unconscious, It's a step up. You accept the post with as much dignity as someone wearing a shirt made from stitched-together sackcloth can muster. The thing is, as the colony stabilizes, people begin caring about things again. Property lines, work hours, Sabbath enforcement. The invisible threads of civilization are pulling taut again, wrapping everyone into a little Puritan tapestry where sneezing too loudly during prayer might earn you a sideways glance. You're not mad about it. Routine is a comfort, but the sudden return of rules does take some adjusting. There's now an official start and end to the workday, announced by someone banging on a metal pan. Church is mandatory. Rest on Sundays is enforced with almost comical seriousness. Someone gets reprimanded for whittling on the Sabbath. Another for smiling too much. Yes, really. Smiling. Historical fact. The Plymouth settlers took their faith very seriously. Sundays were for solemn worship, reflection, and absolutely no work. Not even chopping wood. Historians still debate how strictly this was enforced across different seasons, but the Puritan reputation for somber discipline was well earned. Still, the shift is jarring. A few months ago, you were too weak to stand. Now you're getting a lecture about forgetting to remove your hat before a prayer. You nod solemnly, apologize, and quietly wonder if anyone would notice if you used your hat to smuggle an extra turnip home. But the real shift isn't in the rules, it's in the people. The colony's survivors are no longer ghosts wrapped in rags. They're scarred, yes, worn down, but also tougher. There's muscle on arms that once trembled holding spoons. There's laughter around the cook fires. Even the kids are louder, running, playing, throwing pine cones at each other like it's an Olympic sport. You're stronger too. Your hands are calloused. Your stomach doesn't rumble like it used to. You can build things without immediately regretting it. You even sleep through the night sometimes. Unless the raccoons get into the corn again. You're convinced they've organized. But just when everything feels like it's clicking into place, you make a mistake. It's small. A missed chore. A miscounted ration. But it triggers something larger. A public scolding. One of the elders reads from Scripture about slothfulness and community responsibility. And for a moment, it feels like you're back in the cold, judged not just by your God, but by your neighbors. It's a reminder. You survived, but this isn't a vacation. This is a project. A constant negotiation between faith and fatigue, between community and individuality. The colony isn't just dirt and logs anymore. It's an organism. A messy, muttering, side-eyeing organism with expectations. You nod, apologize, and do the work twice over. You don't want to mess this up. Not now. Not after everything. There's a fringe tidbit people rarely mention. Some of the more ambitious settlers left the colony when things stabilized. They set off into the wilderness in search of more land, more freedom, less regulation. The same survival skills that got them through the winter now whispered, "You can make it on your own. You consider it." Briefly. But then someone brings you a bowl of squash stew, and a child offers you a drawing of a dog with 7 legs, and you decide not yet. At night, the fires are warmer. The songs are softer. Someone's carved a flute and is trying badly to play it. It sounds like a bird caught in a jar, but no one tells them to stop. You sit by the fire and polish a nail you've been saving for something important. You don't know what yet, but it feels good to have a plan, even a vague one. Someone talks about building a school. Another wants to dig a proper well. The dreams are modest, but they're dreams again, not survival strategies. Actual plans for the future. You look around and realize, you're part of this. You made it this far. Not alone, not without loss, but still you're here. And tomorrow, you'll wake up, check the corn, and maybe build another fence. Because this time, you're not just surviving Plymouth, you're helping build it. It's funny how quickly survival turns into routine. Just months ago, you were rationing moldy biscuits and arguing over who coughed first. Now you're waking up with the sunrise, stretching your sore legs, and thinking, maybe I'll rotate the compost pile today. You've become something you never imagined back in England, a functioning colonist. You know how to thatch a roof, mend a fence, bait a trap, and walk through a muddy patch without losing both boots. You've even learned how to predict weather with a half-decent success rate based on bird behavior and the specific creak of your hut's northeast corner. It's not science, but it works. But don't get too comfortable, because now Plymouth has entered what can only be described as the awkward middle phase. It's no longer the desperate, everyone's dying, please pass the sawdust bread stage. But it's also not a thriving city either. You've reached the part of the story where everyone's a little tired, a little territorial, and a little too confident in their amateur blacksmithing skills. You see it in the way people walk now. Straighter backs, faster steps, and a lot more unsolicited advice. You should be rotating your squash rows, says someone who just 3 months ago was eating soapberries by mistake. It's all part of the shift. The colony's power dynamics are stabilizing. There's an informal hierarchy now, governors, elders, militia heads, and a handful of people who actually know how to make a decent axe handle. And with roles come reputations. You've somehow earned a nickname. Nail, they call you, because of that one time you found a single bent nail in a crate and carried it in your pocket for a month, polishing it like treasure. You still have it. It's now your good luck charm and unofficial key to your hut. Social lines begin to form, not intentionally, but inevitably. Families cluster with other families. The old guard, the ones who signed the compact, occasionally remind everyone that they're originals. New arrivals, because yes, a second ship has arrived, are eyed warily. They smell better, for one. Their boots are intact, and they haven't yet experienced the winter. You have mixed feelings about them. On the one hand, they bring supplies, new tools, fresh ideas. On the other, they don't get it. They weren't there when you had to boil tree bark. They never saw the burial hill by moonlight. They talk like survival is a math problem. You want to respect them, but also shake them and scream. You weren't there, man. Historical fact. The ship Fortune arrived in Plymouth in late 1621, bringing new settlers, but very few provisions. The colony, still recovering, now had more mouths to feed and more egos to manage. Historians still argue whether this was a logistical disaster or a necessary expansion. Spoiler, it was both. With growth comes new challenges. Land disputes pop up. Someone's goat wanders too far, and suddenly there's a standoff involving 3 pitchforks and a very unhelpful chicken. Fence lines are redrawn, arguments break out, and the phrase, "but that's my turnip patch," is shouted more often than you'd think. Even religion, once the binding thread of the community, becomes a source of tension. Some want more prayer, more scripture, more fasting. Others, having seen death up close, just want to dance occasionally. Governor Bradford tries to keep the peace, but you can tell he's fraying at the edges. You, meanwhile, try to stay neutral. You share stew. You lend tools. You hum songs without lyrics so no one can accuse you of being worldly. But even you get tired of the bickering. So one day you wander off, just for an hour, just into the trees. And what you find stops you. It's not a bear, not a snake, not even a hostile raccoon gang, which, yes, you're still convinced exists. It's quiet, sun filtering through the leaves, birdsong, the soft rustle of wind. You sit, you breathe, you exist, and for a moment, you remember what you're doing this for. Not the town meetings, not the fencing disputes, not even the food. Although, yes, you would sell your soul for a pie right now. You're here for life, for space, for something new and raw and honest, even if it nearly killed you. You return refreshed, if muddy. You help a neighbor fix a broken bucket. You teach a child how to roast an acorn, so it doesn't taste like soap. You feel the pull of community again. Later that week, a celebration is proposed. Not a formal feast like last time, just a gathering. Some music, a stew pot large enough to scare nearby deer. Everyone contributes something, even if it's just laughter. And at that fire, surrounded by new friends and old scars, you realize something quietly powerful. You're not just surviving Plymouth. You are Plymouth. And just when everything feels almost normal, when you've finally figured out how to keep a fire going all night, and the squash is behaving, you get sick. It creeps up like a bad mood. A little headache here, a sore throat there. You blame it on the weather, the pollen, the sheer audacity of someone sneezing near the water barrel. But by the second day, you can barely stand. Your knees shake. Your teeth chatter even though it's not that cold. You're burning up. Great. It was bound to happen, right? After months of starvation, damp straw beds, shared blankets, and a personal hygiene system best described as aspirational. Your body finally says nope. You lie in your hut, sweating through your only shirt, barely able to sip water. The world tilts sideways, and time goes weird. You drift in and out of dreams. England, the ship, a floating turkey wearing boots. A goat sings to you in perfect French. Voices murmur around you. Someone leaves broth by your bedside. Someone else tucks in the edges of your blanket. You catch fragments. He's not eating. It might be fever. He'll pull through. Maybe. This, oddly, is where you start to understand the real glue of Plymouth. Not the laws, not the crops, not even the religion. It's the care. The silent, unceremonious way people take turns keeping you alive when you can't do it yourself. Someone brings you water. Someone wipes your face with a damp cloth. Someone reads scripture softly beside you, even though your ears are ringing and the words feel like soup. Eventually, you turn a corner. You wake up on the 4th day, maybe the 5th, and the sky is brighter. Your joints still ache, but your mind is clearer. You smell food, and it doesn't make you gag. That's when you know you're on the mend. You sit up slowly, blink, and realize someone has carved a little wooden cat and placed it beside your bed. It's lopsided and vaguely terrifying, but your heart lurches. That's friendship, colonial edition. You hobble outside later, clutching the doorframe like you've never seen light before. People smile. Someone cheers. It's not loud, but it's warm. And then, as you settle onto a log and sip your first full bowl of soup, a wave of clarity hits. This is going to keep happening. Illness isn't going away. Neither is hunger, or cold, or fear. Life in Plymouth isn't about achieving comfort. It's about enduring the discomfort without giving up. Historical fact. Even after the colony stabilized, disease remained a constant threat. New arrivals often brought fresh outbreaks, and the lack of sanitation made recovery difficult. Common ailments included scurvy, typhoid, and bloody flux, which sounds like a 17th century metal band but was definitely not fun. Fringe tidbit. Colonists occasionally used what they called witch hazel tea to treat fevers. Not actual witchcraft, but a shrub-based remedy with mild anti-inflammatory effects. You're not sure what they gave you, but it might have involved tree bark and possibly goose fat. Historians still debate how effective these folk remedies were, and whether some illnesses were misdiagnosed spiritual ailments. Some journals even mention melancholy as a cause of physical decline. You get it. If sadness could be fatal, half the colony would have dropped back in January. But here's the strange, beautiful part of it. After being helpless for days, you feel new. Not fully healed. Not heroic. Just reset. You notice things again. The shimmer of dew on a cabbage leaf. The precise, sleepy rhythm of someone sawing with 2 huts over. The way your breath fogs gently in the morning. Not from fever, but from cool, honest air. You return to your chores with a quiet gratitude. Even splitting firewood feels like a privilege. A painful, blister-producing, shoulder-popping privilege. And you talk to people more now. Not just the polite pass-the-ladle exchanges, but real conversations. About home. About the ones you lost. About how weird it is that you used to worry about taxes and shoe polish. You learned that one man was a silversmith's apprentice before the voyage. Now he's the colony's designated spoon carver. He's proud of it. You admire a spoon. He beams. There's a woman who sings lullabies while she weaves cordage. You don't even realize you're humming along until someone joins you with harmony. You don't just exist in Plymouth anymore. You belong. And as your strength returns, so does your curiosity. You start walking farther each day. Past the fences, past the cleared fields, to the edge of the woods. You listen. You watch. You wonder what's beyond the little world you've built. That night, under a clear sky packed with stars, someone proposes a question. Do you think we'll ever build another ship? Go further? Make a new town? You sit quietly, staring at the stars reflected in your soup. You smile. Maybe, you say, but not without a better map. You thought the danger had passed, that surviving the winter meant you'd cleared the boss level and unlocked peaceful farming simulator mode. But life in Plymouth isn't interested in following your narrative expectations, because just when things start to resemble stability, a new threat rolls in, one even more unpredictable than disease or weather, other people. It starts with whispers, reports from hunters, distant shapes spotted in the trees. It's not the Wampanoag. Your alliance with them still holds, if awkwardly. These are strangers, armed, watching. Tension spreads faster than a head cold in the communal hut. Some say it's a rival tribe, angered by your arrival. Others fear French raiders. One man claims he saw a ghost. You stop asking him for updates. But then actual news. A nearby tribe, the Narragansett, sends a message. Not a letter. A bundle of arrows wrapped in a snakeskin. You don't need to be a diplomat to read the tone there. A council is called. The entire colony gathers in the open space near the meeting house, faces pale, brows tight. Bradford, always calm but never relaxed, stands and reads the message aloud. The meaning is clear. We see you. We might strike. Some want to send a message back, a friendly one, a plea for peace. Others want to start building walls. Someone suggests a preemptive strike, but is immediately silenced with a look that says, "Do you remember last winter? Sit down." Historical fact. In early 1622, the Narragansett did send a snakeskin filled with arrows to the Plymouth settlers. It was interpreted as a threat, an ultimatum. Governor Bradford and his military advisor Miles Standish responded by returning the snakeskin with powder and shot, a symbolic declaration of readiness for battle. So that's what you do. You pack the snakeskin full of gunpowder and bullets, seal it with shaking hands, and send it back. It's bold, maybe foolish, definitely not subtle, but it works. For now, the Narragansett don't attack. No one knows why. Maybe the display spooked them. Maybe they were never planning to strike. Historians still argue whether this exchange was a bluff on both sides, or an avoided disaster. You prefer the version where the bullets were blessed and the snakeskin got tired and slithered home. Still, you feel the unease linger. The walls go up next. Not metaphorical ones, actual walls. You and the others build a palisade around the colony. Sharpened logs, driven into the ground, forming a protective ring. It's exhausting work, but it has a strange effect on morale. Suddenly, everyone has purpose again, a goal, a common fear to unite against. You dig trenches, raise barriers, station lookouts. For the first time since the Mayflower landed, you feel ready, which is, of course, when the rain starts. Because why wouldn't it rain nonstop during your biggest construction project to date? Everything turns to muck. The logs slide in the mud, the tools rust overnight, and you slip so often you're pretty sure the ground is personally offended by your presence. But you keep building, because fear is better than frostbite, and because if someone tries to breach these walls, you want them to at least get a splinter. There's a certain unity in all this, a quiet understanding. You may not have food, or comfort, or shoes without holes, but by golly, you'll have a wall. One night, while you're keeping watch from a tower built mostly out of hope and rotting planks, you spot movement in the dark. Your heart jumps into your throat. You raise your musket. It's a deer. You lower your weapon and exhale slowly, then laugh, a little hysterically. The deer stares at you like you are the nuisance. You're reminded again that this land doesn't belong to you. Not really. You're still a guest. A stubborn, uninvited, permanently underdressed guest trying to build a life in someone else's forest. Fringe tidbit. Some settlers genuinely believed that their success or failure was being watched and judged by spiritual forces in the land. Dreams were considered omens. Natural events, like the sudden blooming of a tree, could be interpreted as divine signals. You're not sure what the deer means, but you do dream that night of it leading you through a field of onions. Interpret as you will. When the wall is finished, it circles the entire village. It's ugly. It's crooked. It's magnificent. You gather at the gate and celebrate with the closest thing to a party Puritans will allow. Shared bread, silent gratitude, and someone reciting Psalm 46 with just a hint of flair. You feel safer. Not safe, but safer. And you begin to realize something. This is the pattern. Peace isn't permanent. Neither is danger. You'll cycle through seasons of building, fearing, planting, recovering. There will always be something. A new threat, a new challenge, a new child born on a muddy floor with hope in her lungs. But now you know the rhythm. You've danced with starvation, shaken hands with fear, and built a fence tall enough to make a raccoon rethink its priorities. You're not unshakable, but you no longer shake easily. And as the rain clears and the air sharpens into spring again, you sharpen too. Not into something harder, but something stronger. You wouldn't call it peace. Exactly, but things are quiet. And after what you've been through, quiet feels like paradise. The crops are in. The palisade holds. The tools are halfway decent, and no one's died of surprise dysentery in a while. You almost forget how fragile all of this is. But Plymouth doesn't let you get too comfortable. Because now it's time to talk politics. Not the two-party system and televised debates kind. No, this is the local flavor, smaller, pettier, and somehow way more personal. It begins with territory. The settlers are spreading out, just a little. Small plots beyond the palisade, eager to get more sunlight or better soil. People start planting beans where there used to be paths. Someone fences off the area near the brook and claims it was always his. Disputes break out. Voices rise. Two women have a full-on shouting match over who owns a half-dead blueberry bush. The elders try to mediate. They call for meetings. Lots of meetings. So many meetings. You attend one, fall asleep, and wake up to the same three men still arguing about whether a pig can be classified as a common nuisance. Historical fact. Disagreements over land ownership and usage became increasingly common in early colonial settlements. With no centralized system to mark or enforce claims, many decisions were based on proximity, witness statements, or I saw it first logic. Historians still argue whether Plymouth's early communal property system delayed inevitable disputes or simply stored them up for later explosion. You try to stay out of it. You're not here for politics. You just want your squash to survive and your hut to stop leaking. But one day, someone accuses you of stealing a sack of grain, which is rich, considering you've been living off roasted acorns and dreams. You deny it, loudly, with dignity. But even so, it stings. After all you've done, after the winter, the fever, the fence building, they still think you're capable of theft. That night, you sit by the fire, stewing. Someone brings you a roasted turnip. You consider throwing it, but it's a really good turnip. You eat it angrily. And then something shifts. The man who accused you comes by. He doesn't apologize exactly, but he brings you a new sack of grain. Says he found the original one in a neighbor's loft. Blames the light, the dust, misremembered boundaries. You want to snap at him. You want to hold a grudge. Instead, you nod. Accept it, because grudges way too much out here. The next day, you patch his roof, because Plymouth is full of people just like you, flawed, tired, hungry for meaning. And none of you are getting out of this alive, unless you help each other up when you fall down. Still, not all of the friction stays domestic. Some new settlers have started talking big about expansion, new towns, even missions deeper into native territory. You hear the whispers. Land acquisition, fort construction, alliances shifting. It feels risky. It feels familiar. Squanto, who once walked through the village with quiet authority, visits less often now. When he does, his face is drawn. He speaks of tensions among tribes, misunderstandings, betrayals. He warns you, peace is not permanent. It's not even natural. It has to be built and rebuilt, over and over. Fringe tidbit. Some colonists attempted to create a kind of intelligence network through interpreters and friendly natives to stay ahead of potential tribal conflict. Squanto was part of this web, but historians still debate whether he used this role to serve the pilgrims or manipulate them for his own position among rival tribes. You thank him. You offer him a place by the fire. He accepts just once. You share roasted corn and stare into the flames. Neither of you says much. The next morning, he's gone, but his words linger, and you start to see the edges fray. Not everything is falling apart, but the lines are there if you look. Cracks in friendships, creeping resentment, debates over authority. Who gets to lead now that the colony is growing? Who decides where the new farmland starts? And how long before the Wampanoag, already pulled in all directions, decide they've given enough? There's a meeting called. This one isn't about pigs or fences. It's about future governance, laws, punishments, taxes. That word alone sends a ripple through the crowd. No one's paid a tax in a year, and they're not eager to start. But some say it's time. If you want to grow, you need structure, representation, a council, maybe even elections. You raise your hand and suggest a rotating leadership system. No one listens. That's fine. You didn't come here to be in charge. You came here to survive. And you have. But now survival is more than food and warmth. It's about balance. Balancing growth with memory, power with humility, faith with flexibility. You still walk past the burial hill sometimes. The wind always picks up there. It smells like salt and pine and something else, something heavy. You nod to the graves. Not in mourning, but in respect. They didn't get this far. But you did. And you'll keep going. Even if Plymouth keeps testing you. The rains come again, but this time, they don't feel like judgment. They feel like time passing. They soften the ground, green the fields, and rattle your roof in that oddly comforting rhythm that tells you you've survived yet another season. Still, not everything is going right. You can feel it, like pressure behind your eyes. People are tense. Harvests are modest, and the newcomers from the Fortune and other ships bring more than just extra mouths. They bring expectations. They heard stories back in England about abundance, about a city on a hill, about wide, open land just waiting for good Christian settlers to shape it. What they find is you, tired, lean, wearing a tunic that used to be a sack of barley. They're disappointed. You don't blame them, but their disappointment spreads like mildew. They start asking questions. Why is there no church building yet? Why are we still eating boiled corn? Why isn't the native population fully converted? You don't have answers. You're still figuring out how to keep raccoons out of the latrines. The newcomers talk about organizing, about sending letters back to investors, about raising grievances. You sigh. You dig. You carry on. Historical fact. The Plymouth settlers were backed by English investors, the adventurers, who expected a return on their money in the form of resources, furs, timber, fish. When early shipments failed to meet expectations, tensions grew. Colonists were pressured to repay debts they could barely fathom. Historians still debate how much pressure came from England versus internal factionalism, but it's clear the colony's ideals were often at odds with its financial obligations. You now find yourself in a colony torn in three directions. The originals, hardened by that first winter, stubborn and proud. The newcomers, eager for structure and reward. The unseen force of London's moneylenders, looming from across the ocean like creditors, with powdered wigs. You're just trying to keep the well from collapsing. The leadership responds with another round of rules. More documentation, a formal work rotation, even land taxes, payable in crops or labor. People grumble. One man refuses, says he didn't sail across the ocean to be told when to weed a field. He vanishes into the woods with his family a week later. You hope they're okay. You also hope they come back with venison. Things get bureaucratic. There are now inventories, rosters, and, unbelievably, meeting notes. Someone teaches themselves shorthand just to keep up. You're assigned to a lumber crew, splitting pine and hauling it 3 miles to the shoreline, where a small boat is being assembled. Yes, a boat. Apparently, someone decided it's time Plymouth had a coastal trading vessel. You help lift a beam and throw your back out for 3 days. Worth it. The project brings people together, oddly. Working on something that isn't food or shelter feels like a treat. The boat becomes a symbol, something beyond mere survival. It says, we're not just staying alive. We're planning something. We have a future. But not everyone shares the optimism. Relations with the Wampanoag are strained. Fewer visits, shorter conversations. A trade that once involved laughter now ends in curt nods. Rumors ripple. Other tribes are watching. Something's brewing. And then a fight. A settler ventures too far, into disputed territory, and doesn't return. His body is found 2 days later, arrow in his chest, stripped of belongings. There's debate over who's responsible, but the air changes. You feel it in your ribs. Governor Bradford calls an emergency meeting. Miles Standish is there, armored, red-faced, pacing like a caged dog. Whispers of retaliation, of raids, of making an example. You feel the dread creep back in. Fringe tidbit. Miles Standish, Plymouth's military advisor, led several preemptive strikes on suspected hostile native groups, actions still debated today. Some see him as a necessary defender, others as a man too eager for violence. One particularly infamous incident involved the beheading of a tribal leader, used as a warning. The tension between defense and brutality haunted the colony for years. You walk the perimeter of the palisade that night, torch in hand. The stars above you are endless. The forest around you doesn't care who owns it. You wonder what Squanto would say, or Samoset, or the people buried beneath the hill. There are no easy answers, only harder seasons ahead. The next day, you help carry the settler's body to the burial hill. His widow walks beside you, silent, face carved from grief. You lower him into the earth and think about how close this place always teeters on the edge. But you keep building, keep planting, keep showing up to the endless, sigh-heavy meetings. Because what else is there? You take your frustrations out on firewood. You bake flatbread with extra salt just to feel rebellious. You teach a child how to find edible moss. You're still here. And somehow, despite everything, Plymouth is still becoming. You wake up one morning and realize the colony smells different. Less like damp wool and anxiety, more like smoke, earth, and something almost pleasant, bread, smoked fish, a future. Summer is here, and it's behaving. The squash vines are healthy. The corn stalks stand proud. Even the stubborn beans seem to be cooperating. You've learned the rhythm of the seasons now. When to till, when to sow, when to hold your breath, and pray the frost holds off just a little longer. You've also learned the rhythm of people. The hotheads flare up and settle down. The quiet ones surprise you with wisdom. The complainers? Still complaining. But you see them differently now. You've shared stew, lost tools, and stories with them. You've buried people together, raised beams, carried water during storms. In this place, shared struggle is intimacy. That new boat finally launches. The Discovery, someone calls it, because why not? It's barely more than a canoe with ambition, but when it glides into the bay, everyone cheers like it's the Ark. A small crew departs, bound for a nearby settlement. They're trading for furs, and maybe bringing back letters, news from across the sea. You watch the boat shrink into a speck, and feel conflicted. A part of you aches for home. Real home. England. The comfort of stone walls, warm pubs, and shoes that fit. But another part of you knows something undeniable. You wouldn't survive England anymore. Not after this. Because Plymouth has made you tougher. Stranger. A little feral, maybe, but also freer. You're standing in the middle of something unfinished. It's chaotic, yes. Often infuriating. But it's also yours now. You help lay new floorboards in a neighbor's hut. You organize a rotating watch schedule. You draft your first official letter to the colony's investors, and it includes the phrase, respectfully requesting less dried cod. Historical fact. Many colonists eventually learned to read and write better while in Plymouth, often driven by necessity. Letters were sent back to England requesting tools, clothing, and occasionally wine. Some even contained carefully edited versions of events, downplaying hardship and emphasizing progress to keep the money flowing. The funniest part? You've actually gained weight. Not much, but enough to notice. Enough to feel your cheeks again. Enough to make your shirt buttons nervous. A celebration is called Midsummer Feast. It's not as solemn as the first harvest. This one feels relaxed, familiar. You roast what little meat you have. You mash root vegetables into something that vaguely resembles pudding. Someone brews a strange fermented drink. It's terrible. You drink it anyway. There's music again. That flute from months ago. Still awful, but charming. and now joined by a hand drum and a makeshift fiddle made from gut string and hope. Children run barefoot, shrieking and wild. Chickens flap. Someone tries to race a goat. Loses. A young couple sneaks away into the woods, and you pretend not to notice. You sit by the fire, cup in hand, watching sparks spin into the sky. Fringe tidbit. The colonists believed firelight kept evil spirits away at night. Some even placed carved stones or herbs around their hearths to trap ill winds. One man swore by keeping garlic in his boot. You've tried that. Mostly just smells like regret. Historians still debate whether these moments of joy, these feasts and music-filled nights, were genuine community traditions or coping mechanisms. You think it's both. That's the secret of Plymouth. The only way to survive the bad is to celebrate the good, even if it's small, even if it's weird. You think of everyone who didn't make it. You think of yourself months ago, stepping off the boat with more optimism than sense, convinced this would be a noble, holy adventure. It was an adventure, just not the kind you planned. You survived. Barely. Bruised, humbled, flea-bitten, but stronger than you've ever been. And maybe that's what Plymouth is. Not just a place. Not just a line on a map. It's a forge. You go to bed that night to the sound of laughter and loons on the water. Your mattress is still just straw, but it's dry. Your roof doesn't leak. Your feet are warm. Your belly is full. You're still here. And tomorrow, you'll wake up again and start all over. Because somehow, impossibly, this life, this ragged, mosquito-bitten, stone soup life, has become worth living. And now, as the fires burn low in your mind, and the sounds of Plymouth drift into quiet embers, you can rest. The hammering fades. The rustling trees hush their secrets. The soft crackle of campfire smoke curls gently toward the stars. Everything slows. You did more than survive. You learned when to bend and when to hold. You carried grief and joy in the same calloused hands. You watched a strange and brutal world reshape itself around you. Not always kindly, but always clearly. And tonight, you leave behind the hunger, the chill, the arguments, and the fear. Let them rest where they belong, in the dark, behind the palisade, beyond the hill. Here, in the hush of memory, there's only quiet, a quiet you earned. Feel the weight of your breath settle. Let it move softer, slower. The muscles in your neck, your shoulders, your hands, let them loosen. The fire has dimmed, the sky has softened, and the stars keep silent watch overhead. You're no longer the stranger. You are part of the land now. You've stitched your own small thread into the fabric of something greater, something living, something old as the trees and young as the morning frost. And though Plymouth will continue, will grow, change, tremble, endure, you can rest now. Let your thoughts flicker like ash on the breeze, and drift, gently, into dreams. You made it. Sleep well.